Hey, we're in a series right now on casting vision and training believers. We've combined those two sales, and we've had some great weeks in this series already. And I'm excited for today because really good friend of mine who is near and dear to my heart, Joe Camarlinghi, is going to share today. And what he's specifically going to be talking about is leaving room for God to do the heavy lifting when it comes to casting vision and training believers. We've learned a lot of lessons together, Joe and I have. And I figured if I asked him to lead today, which by the way, I'm in Bend, Oregon today, and we're in the same room. He's right over there. And so I figured that I better be here in case he tells a story I don't want him to tell, then I can stop him. No, I'm just teasing. I just figured he'd be a little more raw and honest about some of the mistakes that even I made through the journey of casting vision and training believers and bringing people along. And so I just asked them to share what do we need to do to leave room for God to do the heavy lifting. So let's welcome Joe, and he's going to take it from here.
All right, thank you, Brent. And yes, if you see a hand come in from the side, it's Brent trying to stop me from telling a wonderful story. So, as you mentioned, I'm in Bend, Oregon here. Some of the stories I'm going to be sharing are from when we took a traditional church plant that grew into 4 campuses. I was the campus pastor here in Bend, the original campus, and we did a training. We cast vision to people, and it was a lot of the original members of the church. And so I'm going to share some stories of how that went, how we learned along the way, and then also from some time doing some prison ministry as well. And so my whole goal was to just be honest. And as I was praying about what to share, just sharing some of the things that I learned along the way, and hopefully you'll relate to some of the stories that I'm able to share. So the first thing I wanted to share is it's good to just start. If you want to get out of the way and let God, do his thing and speak through you, the best thing is to just be honest about the beginnings of the journey. And maybe you're in the middle of it, being honest there as well. But I think at the beginning, just saying sometimes, hey, this kind of stinks. This is people are, I'm casting vision and they're either, not even going along with it, or we're doing a training through our church and people don't seem to be very receptive, or whatever it might be. I think just being honest and saying, yes, we want to care more about what God thinks than people, but that doesn't mean we don't care anything about what people think at all. And I think Britt shared us that book that I love about the other half of the church in our brain, and how we are designed to want to be in this community. We want people to believe as we do. We want them to see, and especially as a lot of us know, we get excited about discipleship making. We want others to be on that journey with us. And so when they say no or they walk away, I think just being honest and saying, yeah, God, I don't like this. This isn't good, or this isn't fun to sit there and have conversations. I mean, for us, it became something where we had a whole list. Of course, Brent has lists, right, of people. And we had yellow if they were in between, we had green if they were on board, and red was a hard no. And I think, this is after we'd gone through the training, and we were going down the list, but one by one. Okay, you've been through the training. What were your thoughts? Or are you on board? This is what we plan to do as a church. And so we were going through all of that. And at first we had a lot of greens, and then greens would turn to yellows, and actually greens would turn to back to reds, and people we thought were on board weren't. And it became something that was hard. I mean, we saw our entire small group that was like kind of a marriage group. We would meet during the weeks and saw some move away, some that took other jobs in other places, and then some that were just like, no, I don't want to be a part of it. And so we had to admit, my wife and I afterwards, that was hard. That was a hard part of the journey of watching them leave. And then we had other people that were on board before I even stepped into the role, who said, yeah, we want to do this, that all of a sudden said, no, actually not. We're stepping down. And there was a lot of chaos. There was a lot of frustration. And I just remember one meeting that Brent and I were just one-on-one talking about it. And he said something like, I call it the Goodwill Hunting moment. I don't know if you're familiar with that scene where Robin Williams tells him, it's not your fault. And the first thought in my head was like, yeah, it's not my fault. It's your fault for leading us on this crazy journey. You're the one who did this. But what happened next was actually, I just started crying. Tears started coming down my face, after all this vision we cast. And what was happening is, at the forefront of my brain, I was probably saying, yeah, these people just didn't want to do it, or blah, blah, blah. But in reality, it hurt. it hurt to have people that said, not just said no to me, and I could say, well, some of them are saying, yeah, we like what you're saying, Joe, but X, Y, and Z, or we're saying no to Brent. And so all of that though came to the forefront of like, yeah, it does fall on this feeling of like they're saying no to me, and there's not just saying, no to this idea. And so I kind of had that moment. The tears came flowing out, but it was a beautiful thing. God was there and was kind of like able in that honesty to lift, I think, both of us up, bring us closer together, but also be able to help us learn and grow and have him help us in learning and growing the process. So that was one of the things that I thought was a poignant moment. So if you're there, if you're taking a church through it, or you're taking a group through it, and people that you love and care for say no, it's okay to go to God and just say this stinks. I think about Jesus in the garden, right? If it was just about his relationship with God, he wouldn't have cared that the three didn't stay up with him, right? James and John and Peter, but he was like, you guys can't even stay up for 1 hour with me and pray. It mattered to him that his friends weren't there with him in the moment, even though he was having this relationship with the Father. So that was the first thing, is it's okay to say this stinks. Or as a kid growing up, I wasn't allowed to say this sucks. That was like a no-no in my house. But I think in all honesty, I had a shirt that said losing teaches us one thing, and on the back it said it sucks. And so that was kind of, I wasn't allowed to say it, but then my mom, as a joke, got me that shirt. But I just think, yeah, be honest with yourself, where you're at, what's going on. And your group time after this is a great place to do that. Share what's going on. If you've cast vision, if you've taken believers through and there's any struggles, that's what your group's for. And I know group 3 has helped me along the way. All right, the next part of one of the lessons that I learned was eliminating the words you should. So it's like one of those ones where you say never, you have to say it. So you should eliminate you should from your language when it comes to casting vision, even when it sounds something like it's innocent of, oh, you should check out this book From Megachurch to Multiplication. Oh, it's so awesome. You should. The wall goes up. I've just noticed, no matter what. And even as you're enthusiastic about it, and for me, I kind of have, if you ever seen APEST, right, from Ephesians, the idea of these different roles, evangelism is one of my top one. And that's, if you kind of dive deeper into it, is people who read things or hear something, see a documentary, and they love to share it. I'm a journalist by nature, so I love that. But when I use the language, you should read X, Y, and Z, or I read something and I just want to share it, the walls go up. On the other hand, if I say, I tell a story of it being, true in my life, or, hey, I just read this book From Megachurch to Multiplication. There's this thing that's, about extraordinary prayer, or I just read this book, The Starfish and the Spirit, and I was reading about the structure of church, and I share it from my point of view, my woundings. That's different. People can see that, and there's room for God to be in there, because sometimes you don't even know what they might be hearing. It might be a different wound and something that you're sharing that sparks. But when the words you should come up, a lot of questions stop. Even with pastors that I grew up going to their churches, or knew really close and really well, who seem to, when I'm casting vision, enjoy it. I think sometimes that word would it just builds walls. And there was at one point where my family that still goes to traditional church, thought I was anti-organized religion, just because some of the things that I was sharing, and I thought I was doing it in this loving way of sharing my journey, but I think some of the language that I was using was putting up those walls. And it's kind of like, no, I'm anti, in the sense of centralized religion, right? But there was times where we would watch that clip from New Amsterdam, and I thought this was the greatest thing, and you want to share it, some of those things we've done in training. But sometimes, again, the language is a barrier, and God can't be in there to help them where they're at, or it may not be the right time for them. Now, if you share from your journey, that allows them to ask questions. Oh, really? What's that about? Or, oh, well, there's this clip that I watched that I thought was really neat. I can share it with you if you want. Versus, hey, you should check this out. And again, it comes from a place of excitement and a good place of heart. But I think that kind of language helps put the walls up and shuts down questions and self-discovery. And self-discovery is one of the things that's another term that I think is important in casting vision and in training believers, is the self-discovery part of it. And I've had to learn some ways the hard way with a lot of that, and with self-discovery. As I mentioned, Brent and I, we've learned that mistake with people when we took people through casting vision, and you should do this and you should do that. And here's 18 charts that Brent put together that you might want to check out on all of that. But I've learned the hard way too with my own son. So I've shared it with group 3, and they've been with me since for the last 2.5 years. Some of the newer members haven't heard as much, but there's a book called Explosive Child that I've read, and it sounds worse than it is. But basically, kids with this aspect of their brain have trouble being able to see solutions that you present to them. For example, there's a story of this girl in the book that goes down. She has 6 waffles in the freezer. She takes 3 out, and she thinks in her mind, those other 3, those are for tomorrow. So when the little brother comes down and he wants the other 3, and the mom gives those 3 to the little brother, thinking, I'll go to the store, I'll get more later today. The little girl, 8, 9 years old, loses it because she has this similar thing where her brain can't see that. It can't see the solution that mom can just go to the store. No, I had these 3 for now, and those 3 were mine for tomorrow. And it just hit a light with me and my son and some of the things he goes through of like, most recently, the time change is kind of like, he literally woke up when I woke him up. I'm like, you didn't want me to get sleep. It's like he can't see that, hey, we're all going through this time change together. And this is a sweet kid who's never had an issue at school, never had those problems, but his brain has trouble seeing what you're seeing and the solution. So what does this doctor, the psychologist, teach you in the book? Ask questions, self-discovery. As I was reading this, I was going, this is kind of like casting vision and training believers, what we're supposed to do. I have to sit them down and ask questions. Okay, bud, what's going on? Why are you struggling with this? And ask, what do you think some of the solutions are? And it's hard. It's hard because if you think casting vision to adults like we've done, or training believers of like, hey, let's do this together. Let's find some solutions through what you're going through. Imagine an 8-year-old or and about to be 9-year-old and doing that, but it works wonders. God showed up one time. We were just talking about reading, and I just took him out to breakfast and was just kind of like, hey, what's been going on? It's a struggle with reading. Okay, we both agree reading's important. And he just talked about some of the struggles. Well, can I take a 5-minute break if I'm struggling with a word? Yeah, do it. That's great. That sounds like a great solution. But if I would have used the words you should, or lay all these hard foundations, wall goes up, and his brain doesn't work that way. And so it's forced me into allowing God to be in there, self-discovery, all the things that we talk about in casting vision and training believers. And ever since, he does the reading at night. He feels like he came up with this solution that works. And obviously, if he suggested, hey, can I eat 10 chocolate bars and then I'll do my reading, you kind of have to help himself discover that that's not an actual way to do it. But again, there's some similarities there. And so I don't know, maybe if you have kids or grandkids, it's worth reading. Or if you're doing a training session right now, or trying to cast some vision, it's interesting because it is, again, all about self-discovery, asking questions and helping them and letting God lead the way. And what I think those two things lead to, as I wrap it up, is kind of the idea of unexpected ways in which God gives you these joyful stories or things. There's a couple of them, in the time that I've cast vision and done some training in prisons, and I'm always thinking like, oh, this is the thing, or I'm pulling this, from some of our training, and I have to do it in spots a lot of times because they're either far away or only get so much time, and you're thinking, oh, this one's going to really break through with them. But one of the most profound things in casting vision and sharing stories in there was there was a prisoner who was just getting to do some FaceTime with his daughter every once in a while and was struggling doing DBS. And so we had done a DBS on that Friday night, and he was just asking about it at the end. And I just shared, I was like, you know what? I've worked with my kids lately. We were just sitting around asking fun questions and discovery, like, well, if you were building an ark like Noah, what color would you paint it? Or what's it like, what do you think it was like to be on that ship with all those animals? And who do you think had to pick up after all of them? And, fun things that help them lead, instead of starting with, okay, kids, this is what you're going to learn from the story. This is what you need to take away. It became something where it opened up fun questions. So this prisoner thought, hey, that's kind of a cool idea. I'm going to try it. The next day, he started asking questions. They were just in Genesis about what it was like in the garden. And he came back to me that Saturday because we stayed overnight and we did the chapel. And he said, my daughter totally opened up. she's never wanted to know about the Bible. She's never wanted to, really discuss it with me. And yesterday, for the first time, she was asking me questions. She was engaging with me. And that was just the very next day. He had tried it that morning on their version of FaceTime with his daughter. That was cool. But again, God getting in there of all the things I've shared, at the prison or the letters I've written, it's asking about funny random questions with your kids when it comes to self-discovery, that God just created this amazing story with his prisoner and his daughter. And to this day, the relationship has grown. She gets excited about being on the phone with him, and he shared some awesome stories. So that was one where it's just like, God, I got out of the way and just shared what was going on in my life. And instead of like, hey, you should do this, or in casting vision, let's go to the training and this type of thing. It was just sharing some of the things from my own personal life with this man, and God kind of led to that. And I think the last thing is kind of the other fun thing sometimes is when God gets in there and you just back off and you share just your personal story with people. Sometimes non-Christians, really. I go and do business meetings where sometimes I consider it going out amongst the lost and casting vision, depending. I always love to share the story of my business, of what God has done through it. And when I do that, there's just times where people who don't have a church who go, I love that idea. I love what your church is doing, and that journey. Oh, you get to know your neighbors. Oh, you have random conversations with people wherever you go, and you look to do that and get to know them. And so they just light up, and you don't even realize you're casting vision sometimes when you're just doing it, when you're just telling stories and God gets in there. And so I think those are some of the fun things that I've learned along the way. So I want to open up if anyone has any questions on it, but hopefully just sharing some of my story, my journeys, the struggles. There's still struggles with my son when it comes to self-discovery. I still make mistakes all the time with using the words "you should," and I think every parent's kind of gone through that. But I just love how God's kind of along the way given us lots of little victories when it comes to casting vision and training believers. So.
Love it. You should ask them questions.
I love the one that says, "Where in Scripture do you say eat 10 chocolate bars?" That's got to be somewhere. He tells Elijah, isn't it, to eat cake or something when he's running away from someone. So, do we
Brent,
have
I've
them?
got everybody set up where they can unmute themselves and ask questions if they'd like. So you can put a question in the chat, or you can unmute and ask Joe and or Brent questions about their journey of casting vision and training believers, if you'd like.
And if you ask Brent, and I'll do the follow up and give you the truth of whatever answer, I'll just translate it into.
I'll ask a question, Joe. Joe, one of your first things you were just talking about the pain of walking through this with people. So now that you're a little distance out from that, I assume the pain isn't as acute today. Kind of what is it like now? And as you reflect back on that, how do you feel about it? What has God done in your life concerning that pain of the people that left you?
That's a good question. I think he's allowed for getting rid of my timeline, because there's still the pain in that a lot of our friends were the people that were in our small group. So not only did we lose a lot of the people that would go on the journey with this, we lost a lot of friends. We had just moved to Bend. And so the person who actually replaced his campus pastor, we'd gotten to know him and his family and some of those people. So they left right before I took over. So then we made new friends, and then we had this journey, and then COVID hit. So I think when we started to say, hey, we were sitting down and talking about it, that this, God, I don't like this. We don't like this. This is hard on our family. When it crops up, we can still say that. We still struggle. We had one family come in, and then it was kind of inconsistent and those sorts of things. But I think as we've been more honest with our feelings and we talk about it as a family, as a husband and wife, the more we can just kind of go, okay, God, but in the end, we know that you want what's best for us. And the other thing that I would do is press, like you meet someone and you're like, oh, I really hope, that they hear this or they want to be a part of our group. And now I just don't. I just go, hey, this is cool. Or I meet a neighbor and I'm not like, okay, hopefully they're, I try to put them in this category. I just do it. And then it seems so much easier. The pressure seems to be off the more I just kind of back off and go, okay, God, the more I'm just obedient, I share my story, you're going to take care of the rest. And I think that pressure is kind of gone from all of it. And that's been amazing.
Joe, when you and this could be for you and Brent, when you've cast vision, what questions have you found that you can ask people that tend to really cause them to want to learn more? Or what verses have you used, or what things have you said that you've just felt in the casting vision process really connected with people with a legacy church background and caused them to not immediately be turned off to it, but excited maybe to learn more, or to, to engage with you more in a dialogue about it?
I can start with that one. I think that the more transparent and vulnerable you are about your own weaknesses in being a disciple of Jesus, the more it will relate to the people. And so I just found, Chris, that when I shared a story of my disobedience of growing up in doing church and not following these principles, and then simply asking a question related to my story of disobedience about how are they doing with that. That tends to be a lot more powerful than anything else that we did. And I think it's because of the vulnerability.
Yeah, I would just kind of echo the vulnerability, and I was just thinking of as I share from something, if I don't try to polish the story, I think I wanted so bad to for people to see what it could be. You're like, oh, you could be in these vibrant groups together, and God could be there, and we could be transforming our city, and you want to take a little story and transform it. If I just tell the story, not caring what they think about the outcome, I think that's helped me in kind of saying, okay, I'm just going to tell this story. If they take something from it, great. And maybe they take something that I'm not even thinking about, versus like, oh, I have to make this story sound, really good because I want them to see the victory in it. And so both sharing the struggles, but also and even in sharing some of the victories as well. It's just kind of like putting it out there and seeing if they ask more questions off of it. It's great. And so, yeah. Brent, do you want to take this? It says, what from Bob, what would you say to someone on staff at a legacy church feeling frustrated at the continued direction of the leadership?
Yeah, that's a great question, Bob. I think it only, okay, I'm in the room right now with Joe, and I'll tell you this, it only takes one other person to be a partner with you for you to be obedient to live this out. Don't try to change an entire church. It's not a good idea. This is a self-discovery process, and what the stories that you're going to tell out of your own obedience are the stories that are going to inspire people to change the most. And the rest is where that's what today's about. Leave room for God to do the heavy lifting. And I just think that advice, if I would have known that early on, it would have helped us immensely. I think we learned some of that the hard way. At some point in this journey, I gave Joe permission to slap me at any time he wanted to get me back on track. As he's leaving his chair to come over here. And I just think it really, honestly, if you've got one other person that you can do it with, and then just start telling stories and don't be frustrated with the church. Let God take care of it.
Yeah, I like that. I like this group, and the support that we have here it's a really great safe place to share some of that. And I think Brent and I both said all along the way when we were in the group together, and the more we shared with the group the frustrations, that whatever was going on, we would hear them from others as well. It's a support, it's a chance to release it to the group and also to God. As you're honest in the group about the frustrations, that's what the group time is for, is to be able to release the things, ask for help with the things that are blocking you from multiplying or taking your focus away from the actual discipleship and the things that you're doing, or drawing your energy away from just living it out. And that's what I think can happen when you're in the traditional setting, is sometimes it just keeps you distracted from just the little things of your obedience, and you're so focused on the frustration of what maybe others are doing or not doing, and it distracts from your obedience. And I think if we would have given up a lot of that and been in the group and been able to do that earlier, it would have saved us a lot of frustration along the way.
So, Trace, I see your question there. Have you discovered any green light or yellow light phrases that help direct your conversations in vision casting? Things people say that can accelerate or slow the conversation. Man, if you guys remember when you go through the 8-week training, there's a kind of a picture that shows the process in week 8 of overview, just as to remind you of the big overview. And right in the middle of all of the sales is this extraordinary prayer piece. And if you want to know what the yellow light or green light thing that could accelerate it more than anything it is how much of you actually prayed for the people that you're having conversations with and trust God to do the work instead of what you say or what you don't say. I've just seen that as we've grown in our prayer life, there's a direct correlation with the number of people who are saying yes to following Jesus through disciple making. And the other thing is, out of the prayer time, there have been times that God will give me or somebody on our team a specific insight into somebody's life. And when you ask them about that part of their life, it's like God knew that was the avenue to get to their heart. And I don't think you can underestimate the power of prayer and only doing what the Lord tells you to say and to do. If it worked for Jesus, it probably will work for us.
I see here it says if you're in a place where you believe you didn't leave room for God to work or got off course, is there a graceful way to make mid-course correction? That's from Frank. And Frank, yes, I actually should have shared that with family, where I thought, oh, I'm just sharing from my heart, and I just apologized. I said in terms of when they thought, oh, you're against organized religion, I said sorry you felt that way, or sorry, maybe I was explaining things this way. Shared more stories. And then I think from then on, I was just conscious about how I shared what was going on. And then I would ask them or try to help them. They would want to go to a legacy church. Well, I know people that run them. And I remember Stan last year at our gathering was talking about that. You don't know what God has for them. It may be to continue in a legacy church or to stay there. So if that's it, I'm going to guide them to some of the legacy church people I know in that area who I have a relationship with. And if they like the vision and I continue to share my stories, then God will help lead them back. So the first thing was I kind of apologized. And the second thing I was kind of was just like, okay, I'm just going to continue to share, but I'm going to help them where they're at. Ask them about what they have going on. Ask them questions about where they might want to go to church or their walk with God, instead of trying to focus or reframe everything into discipleship. And that's helped immensely.
And Bob, I typed this out, but I'll just answer this one real quick. I think you don't get a senior pastor to do it. Only God can do that. And I would pray a lot, and I would give a couple simple invitations to invite them, if you've got a relationship with them, to go out among the lost with you. Hey, do you want to go with me? Don't make it about DMM, the whole vision, the whole casting vision. If they want to take personal steps of obedience, man, this journey is like one step of obedience at a time. And that's why out of our coaching groups, like, what's your next step of obedience? Like, I'm still taking steps of obedience. And every time I think God's peeled my onion, he has not finished peeling the onion. There's another layer that he wants to peel back, and he gets to. So we have to keep asking ourselves in our groups every week, what is your next step of obedience? And I think a great question for everybody to ask today is, where do you need to leave room for God to work? And the second question would be, is there anywhere you need to lose some language of you should or something like that, and go and reflect more on telling personal stories? So I think that'd be a good place to go in our coaching sessions today.
Hey, I had a quick thought. Chris's question on what verses. The verse that I find really helpful for casting vision is the Revelation 7 verse, because it says, from every tongue, tribe, and nation, a multitude too numerous to count. When I was in Japan, I would just say, hey, don't you think there needs to be more than 0.4% Japanese up in heaven? And they'd be going, wow. It takes their eyes off themselves and says, wow, we need to win the lost. And so that's a very good verse for casting vision.
A couple questions that my sister and I found helpful are asking people, are they satisfied with their experience as a Great Commission Christian? Or what words would you use to describe your experience as a Great Commission Christian? And that has been very eye-opening. Like they realize they're deficient or they're not participating, and then you can share maybe your testimony of the training you've just been through and that kind of thing. Oh, and also Bill Bright, I'm with Campus Crusade or crew now. And our founder, Bill Bright, always was coined as saying, successful evangelism is taking the initiative in the power of the Holy Spirit and then leave the results with God. And I love that. I do it in support raising, everything that I do, just take the initiative in the power of the Holy Spirit and leave the results with God. So that kind of connects with what you were saying, Joe.
You gonna wrap it, Jim?
Yeah, I like that. Lisa, I was just going to close those two questions that Brent was sharing are great in group, and just be praying. I'm going to Uganda next Tuesday, and I'm going to be having to practice what I preach and sharing there with a couple of pastors and sharing at a church I'm going to speak at. Now I have to undo what some pastor went there about 6 years ago and taught traditional church planting. He might be in this room, he might not be, to all these people in Uganda. So, but I am going to work on these things. In fact, I'm going to answer those two questions in the group time of like, I have to work on asking these questions. So I love these verses that everyone has shared, because I'm going to arm myself with those as I go over there. So, and thank you for just giving the time to share today.